Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Benjamin Peters, the director of the Global Scholars Program here at the University of Michigan. And on behalf of our GSP community members, I want to welcome you to the 8th annual Global Citizenship in Practice event. Before we begin, I'd like to ask everyone to check your phones and make sure that they're in silent mode. For accessibility, we're grateful to Screenline Captioning for providing accessible text throughout the event. And I want to begin today's event with land acknowledgement. The Global Scholars Program, like the University of Michigan, acknowledges the university's origins in a land grant from the Anishinaabe, including Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Budawadumi, and the Wyandot. And we further acknowledge that our university stands, like almost all property in the United States, on lands obtained generally in unconscionable ways from indigenous peoples. Knowing where we are changes neither the past nor the present. However, through scholarship and pedagogy, we work to create a future in which the past is thoroughly understood and the present supports human flourishing and justice while enacting an ethic of care and compassion. We're pleased that you're joining us today, and for those of you who might not be familiar with the Global Scholars Program, we're one of the Michigan learning communities, and we're a community for sophomores and above who live together in the North Quad dormitory and take common classes together on critical global issues, facilitating global engagement, and organizing global justice. We're a globally diverse community with students from 34 nationalities, and following our mission, we seek to equip students with the skills and the knowledge to become interculturally competent leaders and responsible global citizens. In 2016, GSP established the Global Citizenship in Practice event to advance our awareness and action as we grapple with both the promises and the challenges of a shared identity as global citizens. This year's theme, Global Citizenship in an Age of Democratic Peril, follows in this tradition with our keynote speaker, Dr. Saladin Ambar, professor of political science and senior scholar at Rutgers University's Eagleton Institute of Politics. Welcome, Dr. Ambar. Thank you. Before some further introductions, I also want to thank our co-sponsors who helped make today's event possible. First, I'd like to thank Michigan Community Scholars Program, who has partnered with GSP this year to host Dr. Ambar for a series of public talks and to visits to classes in both GSP and MCSP. And Dr. Ambar will be with us until next Wednesday. So thank you to our friends and colleagues at MCSP. In terms of our co-sponsors for today's event who helped make this possible, I also want to thank our friends and colleagues at the English Language Institute, the Health Sciences Scholars Program, the Language Resource Center, the Lloyd Scholars for Writing and the Arts, the Michigan Research and Discovery Scholars Program, the University of Michigan Political Science Department, the Residential College, and the Women in Science and Engineering Residence Program. We're so grateful to have the support of so many colleagues and communities here on campus, and I want to thank you all for your support of this event and for this program. Every year at Global Citizenship in Practice, we select a member of our student community to reflect on their own journey and identity as a global citizen. This year, our featured student speaker is Sarah Hollingshead. Sarah's a senior in her last semester at Michigan. She'll be graduating very soon, in a couple months. She's studying international studies and sociocultural anthropology. On campus, she's a transfer student mentor for Transfer Connections and a Transfer Bridge Fellowship Coordinator at Optimize. She's also served as a Conversation Circles facilitator for the English Language Institute. Off campus, Sarah is a member of Women of Color Advancing Peace, Security, and Conflict Transformation, and also a member of the Japanese American Citizens League Detroit chapter. In addition, she was recently selected as a participant, one of very few participants, one of 2 undergraduate college students in the world to participate in the Hiroshima ICANN Academy to learn about nuclear disarmament and abolition. If you're not familiar with ICANN, it's the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, and that organization was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017. Sarah is going to be traveling to Hiroshima next month to participate in the on-site program. Safe travels. Sarah is currently in her 3rd year of membership in GSP. During her first year in the program, she worked with our NGO partner, Alpha Education, a Canadian nonprofit that works to foster awareness and a critical understanding of an often overlooked World War II history. And they're also working in the interest of furthering the values of justice, peace, and reconciliation, both for survivors of the past and for those who shape the historical narratives of the present and the future. Following her first year in the program, Sarah came back to GSP, but in the summer, she went on the GSP and Michigan Community Scholars Program's joint service learning trip to Makanda, South Africa, where she worked with another GSP NGO partner in Kulaleko. That's a nonprofit in South Africa supporting the next generation of South African leaders through higher education and workforce preparation services. In her 2nd year at GSP, Sarah served both as a collaborative group facilitator and as a dialogue facilitator, and was actively engaged in the Global Scholars Program student organization. Finally, this year she returned as a general member for her final semester in GSP and at the University of Michigan. May I introduce to you, and could you please help me welcome Sarah Hollingshead.
Thank you, Benji. I'm really honored to have been selected to speak at this Global Citizenship in Practice event, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak about my own thoughts and reflect on my experiences of global citizenship. Before I begin, I'd like to thank my parents and my sister for being here, and would like to do so in Japanese as well. このイベントで自分の経験、感想を述べられたことにとても感謝しています。そして私の話を聞きに来てくれた両親と妹にも感謝しています。ありがとうございました。Firstly, I'd like to provide some context by sharing my positionality and the identities that shaped my experiences. I'm a first-generation Japanese American with roots in Hiroshima, Japan, where my mother's family is from. I often visit my family in Japan for summers at a time, and it's during these visits that my own journey towards understanding global citizenship began. It began in a city whose resilience and strength continually amaze me despite its tragic past. The atomic bombing of Hiroshima marked the first use of a nuclear weapon in warfare, unleashing massive devastation on the city. This horrific event, along with the eventual end of World War II, was part of a conflict that claimed millions of lives worldwide, including 25 million deaths in the Asia-Pacific region, the majority of whom were civilians. Hiroshima was strategically picked as a bombing site because of its high rates of population, its geographical location in a valley, and its significant military and industrial hubs. The bomb was dropped at 8:15 a.m. on August 6, 1945, and reduced much of the city into ash and rubble, and killed tens of thousands of people instantly. The firestorms, black rain, and radiation poisoning that came afterward only grew the death toll as people succumbed to their injuries and the dire lack of medical attention. My grandmother's memories and her storytelling of that day have profoundly shaped my understanding of suffering and resilience. She told me how those who initially survived the blast found their way to her home and uttered the same words, atsui, atsui, omizu, omizu, or hot, hot, and water, water. They submerge themselves in the river near her house, hoping it might soothe their pain. That image stays with me, just as it has with her for all of these years. This story embodies personal grief and extends into a collective call to action, a plea for each of us to witness the pain of others and commit to ensuring that such suffering is never repeated. We all carry the weight of this history, whether or not it is our own, because what happened in Hiroshima transcends borders, cultures, and generations. It speaks to a universal truth that peace is fragile, that violence leads to destruction beyond imagination, and that we, as global citizens, have a moral obligation to protect one another from repeating the same mistakes. In this way, my grandmother's memories not only illuminate the past, but also urge us to look at the present. It reminds us that the lessons of Hiroshima are not confined to history. Through so much destruction and suffering, Hiroshima has coined the phrase, "No more Hiroshimas." At its core, this statement expresses a strong desire for the abolition of nuclear weapons, reflecting the belief that such atrocity should never be repeated and the world must work towards complete nuclear disarmament. The memory of those who suffered demands nothing less than our full attention, our active engagement, and our unwavering dedication to ensuring that such devastation never happens again. Hiroshima is often recognized as a city marked by mass destruction, but it's essential to see it as much more than a one-dimensional symbol of tragedy. It's a place rich in love, in community, and culture, far beyond the history of August 6th. While the atomic bombing impacted its history, it does not define the spirit of the city or its people. Over the years, Hiroshima has rebuilt itself not just physically, but emotionally and socially. Each time my family visits Japan, my sister and I make it a point to visit the Atomic Bomb Dome, the Genbaku Dome, and the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum. When I went this past summer, I noticed a diverse group of people coming together, advocating for justice while playing a variety of instruments in street performances that promoted peace. It was striking to see this gathering in such a significant site. Some international individuals in the group explained they had chosen Hiroshima because of what it symbolizes. A city that has experienced immense suffering, yet continues to stand for peace. What struck me most was how the local community responded. Instead of hostility or indifference, there was a sense of quiet solidarity. People passed by and stopped to listen, some offering supportive nods or small gestures of understanding. That moment made me realize how deeply Hiroshima's legacy of resilience and community resonates far beyond its own city and history. The people of Hiroshima have rebuilt a community grounded in empathy, one that not only heals itself, but extends that compassion to those facing injustice worldwide. We can appreciate the city to be a dynamic and evolving city, one that thrives despite its past. In addition to resilience, peace, and destruction, to me, Hiroshima represents family. It's where my mother grew up and where my family gathers to reconnect with relatives and friends. It's where I tried new foods and honed my Japanese skills to better communicate with others. It's where I learned the importance of intercultural communication within my own family. It's where I spent hot, humid summers with my sister, playing outside, embracing the atmosphere of a city steeped in history. My love and connection to Hiroshima fostered my understanding of global citizenship. After spending months there, I've come to realize that Hiroshima is more than its past. It's a city rich in love with complex histories and a dynamic future. Recognizing the multidimensionality of Hiroshima allows us to appreciate its resilience, culture, and hope, viewing it not only as a site of historical tragedy, but also as a vibrant community. This perspective honors its past while embracing its evolving present and future, reminding us that places are shaped by more than just a single story. Just as Hiroshima is not a one-dimensional city defined solely by its past, neither are the people we encounter. One thing I have learned throughout my time in GSP is the importance of intercultural communication and how to build intercultural relationships. Each person carries a multitude of experiences, beliefs, and perspectives that can contribute to their identity. Embracing this complexity requires us to move beyond surface-level interactions and to approach conversations with curiosity and empathy. As I reflect on my experiences as both a collaborative group facilitator and a dialogue facilitator, I'm reminded that every conversation is an opportunity for growth and for connection. Just as Hiroshima requires a multidimensional lens, so do our relationships, which can flourish when we embrace the complexity of our identities and diversity of our experiences. In sharing our experiences, we can also recognize commonalities in our interconnected struggles for justice. On October 11th, 2024, just last week, the Norwegian Nobel Committee decided to award the Nobel Peace Prize to the Japanese grassroots organization Nihon Hidankyo. The organization is led by Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bomb survivors called Hibakusha, who were awarded the Peace Prize for their ongoing efforts to call for a world free of nuclear weapons and for their dedicated testimonies to help people understand why nuclear weapons should never be used again. Supporters of Nihon Hidankyo in Hiroshima have pointed out that winning the Nobel Peace Prize is not the goal. The real goal is to end a world with raging war and suffering and to abolish nuclear weapons. The broadening of this vision is captured in a comment made during a press conference where the co-chair of Nihon Hidankyo held back tears and said, quote, "Especially in places like Israel and Gaza, children are being covered in blood and living every day without food, having their schools destroyed, stations destroyed, and bridges destroyed. It's like Japan 80 years ago," end quote. This quotation reminds us of the need for solidarity across contexts and across communities, and highlights the connection between nuclear disarmament and peace more generally. When I reflect on the ongoing violence around the world, it tells me that the world has yet to learn the lessons of Hiroshima, where civilians continue to suffer these same horrors that Hibakusha have witnessed and testified to. Hiroshima and Gaza are bound by a shared tragedy of human suffering in the face of senseless violence. In Hiroshima, the atomic bomb reduced a city to ashes and devastated its people. Gaza, too, bears the scars of relentless conflict, where civilians live under the constant threat of destruction, where tens of thousands of innocent lives have been taken. The connection between Hiroshima and other sites of conflict speaks to a deeper truth. As long as international violence and large-scale injustices persist, we have failed to honor the memory of those who suffered in Hiroshima, and we risk and allow history to repeat itself in new and horrific ways. To honor the legacy and memory of Hibakusha, I stand in solidarity with the people of Gaza. I'm driven by a sense of urgency and a personal commitment to justice. Gaza parallels Hiroshima with its stories of violence, recognizing that their struggles resonate with the legacy of resilience and humanity we must uphold. We, as global citizens, must embrace our duty to build a world where such suffering is eliminated. This requires not only advocating for peace and for justice, but also confronting the systems of violence that perpetuate war, displacement, and inequity. We can all act through education, advocacy, dialogue, and unwavering efforts for diplomacy and disarmament to ensure that the lessons of Hiroshima and the pain of Gaza push us towards a future where humanity chooses peace, not destruction. As I look ahead to the next month, I'm excited to participate in the Hiroshima ICANN Academy, which is an opportunity that aligns with my commitment to nuclear disarmament and global citizenship, shaped by my experiences in the Global Scholars Program. This on-site educational program, hosted by the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons and Hiroshima Prefecture, will deepen my understanding of the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons. Through expert lectures, testimonies from Hibakusha, and engagement in global peace initiatives, I aim to enhance my advocacy skills and actively practice global citizenship. I applied to this academy because I believe in using my privilege to connect with like-minded individuals, fostering international solidarity as we work together towards a more peaceful future. The ICANN Academy embodies the principles we practice in GSP, offering me the chance to directly learn about the long-lasting impact of nuclear weapons and the urgent need for disarmament. As I prepared to attend the Hiroshima ICANN Academy, I began reflecting on how my time in GSP has influenced my understanding of global citizenship. My own definition continues to evolve. I find myself most thankful for the multidimensional and interdisciplinary skills that GSP has dedicated itself to. In preparation for this speech, I looked back on my reflection papers in ALA 210 and 211, and I noted that I was drawn to this program because of these very skills. The program encourages intentionality in approaching global issues, providing me with a broad framework that connects diverse disciplines and empowers me to act on my commitment to global citizenship. Global citizenship is also not one-dimensional. It values our unique identities while connecting us through shared experiences and has increased my appreciation for complexities of different cultures and global challenges. The story of Hiroshima teaches us that the past is not merely a series of events to be studied. It's a living narrative that informs our present and shapes our future. Understanding the nuance of Hiroshima allows us to see it as more than a city defined by tragedy. It's a testament to resilience, to community, and to hope. Each of us carries the weight of this history, and as global citizens, we must recognize our shared responsibility to learn from it. These lessons echo through time, reminding us that peace is not a given. It's fragile and must be actively nurtured and requires long-term commitment. The ongoing struggles faced by communities around the world, like those in Palestine, Lebanon, Sudan, the Congo, and Ukraine, just to name a few, illustrate that violence and suffering persist in many forms. As we move forward, let us carry the memory of those who have suffered and to honor them by actively engaging in the pursuit of a more just world. We must recognize the interconnectedness of our struggles and be relentless in our pursuit of peace, knowing that each action we take can contribute to healing and transformation. By embracing our roles as global citizens, we can ensure that the lessons of the past guide us towards a future that incorporates processes of dialogue and collaboration where peace prevails. Together as global citizens, we can build and fight for a world in the spirit of no Hiroshimas, where we embrace the complexity of our shared humanity, choosing empathy, understanding, and a commitment to justice over division and violence, recognizing that true peace is found in honoring the depth of every story, every struggle, and every life. Thank you. ありがとうございました。
Thank you so much, Sarah. On behalf of the program, I want to thank you for everything you've contributed to our GSP community and partners we work with around the world. And I want to thank you especially for the vision and challenge you gave us today, especially in highlighting for us what's at stake as global citizenships and what's required in terms of a commitment for us each to take action on those, whatever that issue is for us. So I really appreciate it. We wish you good luck in Hiroshima, safe travels next month, and of course, we wish you all the best after you graduate in December. We're glad you're going to be with us at GSP for a couple more months. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask Sarah now to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Saladin Ambar.
I'm pleased to introduce this year's Global Citizenship and Practice keynote speaker, Dr. Saladin Ambar. Dr. Ambar is a professor of political science and senior scholar at Rutgers University's Eagleton Institute of Politics. He is the 2023 winner of the Association of American Publishers Prose Best Book Award in Government and Politics for Stars and Shadows, The Politics of Interracial Friendship from Jefferson to Obama. Dr. Ambar is the author of numerous books, including Malcolm X at Oxford Union, Racial Politics in a Global Era, nominated for a Hurston Wright Legacy Award, and currently in development for a feature-length film. He currently serves as co-director of the Democracy Committee for the New Jersey Institute for Racial Justice's Reparations Council and is presently working as a scholarly advisor for the Lincoln Presidential Foundation, where he has contributed to its 3-part docuseries on Lincoln's Lyceum Address. Dr. Ambar's forthcoming book, 3 Murders on the Mississippi, 1,000 Days That Made Abraham Lincoln, offers a narrative examination of a series of racially motivated lynchings and murders beginning in 1835 that haunted the young Abraham Lincoln and illuminated for him how vulnerable America was to the rise of despotism. The events became a central focus of Lincoln's first major speech, the Lyceum Address, delivered in 1838. Dr. Ambar has served as a fact-checker and contributor for the Smithsonian Channel, CNN's Race for the White House series, and for PBS New York and New Jersey's Metro Focus. Professor Ambar served as host for the Eagleton Institute of Politics podcast, This Moment in Democracy, where he has interviewed numerous public figures and policymakers. His work has appeared in the Washington Post, New York Daily News, Politico, NPR, Newsweek, and The Root, among other outlets including New Jersey Spotlight, where he is an opinion writer. He is the father of 17-year-old triplets and lives in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, with his cats Orson and Oscar. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ambar.
It's always nice to get my cats Orson and Oscar a shout out in an introduction, so thank you for that. Good morning. Let me begin by thanking my dear friend, Dr. Benjamin Peters. As was mentioned, I've known Benji, we've known each other for 20 years now, and we were both beginning our doctoral programs at Rutgers University before COVID, before the financial crisis, before that person's ride down the escalator. It was a very different world when we met, but the continuity of friendship and the bonds that we've shared over the years is very special to me, so I thank you for that. This is my first time visiting the University of Michigan, and if Sarah is representative of your student body, you are richly blessed as a community. Could we please once again thank Sarah for her poignant remarks? Thank you. My talk today is on global citizenship in an age of democratic peril. Before we get to the issue of peril, I want to spend a moment reflecting on why global citizenship should be esteemed more than nationalism. Most of us can probably see the dangers in nationalism. The history of the 20th century, I think well illuminated in part by Sarah, is littered with the ill receipts of nationalism's violent trek throughout the world. But I want to give, in this moment, nationalism its due, however briefly, at least as a starting point for thinking about global citizenship in our current moment. First, I think it's important that we acknowledge that a love for humanity and the world is originally cultivated by what is familiar to us. Family, friends, our local community, these are rightly the source from which other less proximate bonds emerge. When Edmund Burke criticized the French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau as a lover of his kind but a hater of his kindred, it was a fair admonishment of the flaw we sometimes see in those who advocate a world without borders, yet erect many of them in their personal relationships. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was a notoriously terrible father, and yet he loved the world. I think it's important to reflect on sometimes we can be somewhat hypocritical or short-sighted in our vision for a global humanity and not love the people right before us. Perhaps you had a grandmother like mine who warned against being so heavenly minded that you are of no earthly good. This is a bit like Angela Davis's, y'all know Angela Davis? A bit like Angela Davis's criticism of the Declaration of Independence's creed, all men are created equal. Jefferson could leap to all men, but not to those at Monticello who are right in front of him, laboring without pay, indeed laboring for him, at least one of them in the most biological sense of the word. This is the challenge with all lives matter. It widens the horizon of justice before accounting for the injustice right in front of our faces. Nationalism at its best accounts for the very real need to encompass a sense of community that is not so large as to defy our capacity to give to it. You know, James Madison understood this well in those Federalist Papers, where he struggled to prove how by enlarging the territory of our republic, we could somehow not only reduce faction, but also keep our attachments and feelings for our government. It's a very hard thing to love something or someone you have little or no experience with in your daily life. Places like the University of Michigan, not unlike my home institution of Rutgers University, resolve this by a college system or living learning communities. Y'all got living learning communities, you got global scholars, right? And smaller units that students feel bonded to. Ask any development officer. Any development officers in the room? You don't have to out yourselves, I'm sorry. Ask a development officer. Nobody gives to their alma mater. They give to their experience. Love, even political love, begins with what is particular, not universal. But this should be a beginning, not an ending. That which is global, of course, encompasses all of humanity and therefore affirms a common bond we are to feel for our fellow travelers in a fleeting world. Nationalism cuts off love at borders. It teaches the love of blood and heritage and familiarity. At heart, it is, when closely scrutinized, something actually less than love. For to love oneself and only those you can identify with through geography or race or ethnicity is much more like self-interest. Love, on the contrary, is a disinterested venture. This matters particularly in a world where our ability to experience humanity is so much easier than it has ever been. Because of the information age and our technological innovations, we can experience the joys, sufferings, farces, banalities of human beings many thousands of miles from us with little to no effort. And our ability to assist them or do them harm is just as easy. Abraham Lincoln's two greatest speeches remind us of this. At Gettysburg, he ends his address with two words, the earth. At his second inaugural address, he ends the speech similarly. The two words are all nations. Whether it is the desire to see representative government flourish or the hope for a just and lasting peace, Lincoln recognized that if the American experiment was to have any lasting value, it was because it was not merely an American endeavor, but one we could envision for all of humanity. Now, let's get to this subject of democratic decline and peril. I want to make an observation that our current moment is typified by two broad global phenomena. Ones that have arisen in stark relief here in the United States, pointedly of late. They have to do with defeat and belonging. Democratic virtue has everything to do with these two features of political community. How we manage them, how we come to understand them, are the great indicators of the health of our democratic system. And I realize it's not Sunday, but I'm going to give y'all a scripture. Y'all look like y'all need a scripture. It's early on a Saturday morning. Y'all need some help. Looking out here at y'all. Thank you for coming on a 10 a.m. talk on a Saturday morning. God bless you. You get points for that. Let me give you a little, maybe you've heard of this. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul. Most of us have heard this verse. It reflects a principle that there is something we are, in essence, that is so precious and so in need of protecting that even every possession of the earth cannot equal its value. It is a spiritual principle very much in line with the Republican ideal that self-governing human beings are greater than the sum of their political victories. In fact, the entire system of self-government, which depends on majority rule, which in turn depends on elections, which in turn depends on defeat as a core element of political life, must find favor and indeed esteem in losing. Shakespeare introduced his own secular take on this verse. At least that's how I see it. In Julius Caesar. Y'all read Julius Caesar here? Y'all read plays? Y'all do this stuff still? Okay, just checking. All right. You'll recall when Brutus was assessing the military situation at the end of the play, and he realizes he's done for. He decides to take his own life. He calls Strato to him. Thy life has had some smatch of honor in it. Brutus is a very arrogant dude, right? Your life has had some smatch of honor in it, and he calls Strato to help assist in his death. But before he leaves the earth, he utters these lines. I shall have glory by this losing day, more than Octavius and Mark Antony by this vile conquest shall attain unto. I shall have glory by this losing day. In the transition from a republic to an empire, which is what the story of Julius Caesar is about, Brutus was sharing with his fellow Republicans a model of how citizens, not subjects, are to live their lives. Defeat with honor. Glory, in Brutus's words, is better than victory through vile conquest. A republic must preserve the high character of its citizens. Democracy is threatened most when the spirit of profit, of victory, of expansion supersede victory over oneself. You know, when George Washington walked away from political power after his second term in office, he was upholding the Brutus model of citizenship, this creed of a soul-centric polity that yearns for something that is integral, for decency over winning. And I don't mean to overly romanticize Washington. He was walking around with black men's teeth in his mouth, something we must remember. But we also cannot simply denigrate Washington, because the lesson he taught us about leaving power behind is immensely valuable still. Walking away from power has become the cousin of political defeat. Our system is rife with examples of political leaders whose personal vanity is so tied to their identification with political power that neither shame nor public opprobrium are strong enough to encourage the voluntary stepping away from office. Only death, or its political equivalent, the loss of financial support, are sufficient grounds for doing so. Whether the regime is autocratic, oligarchic, fascistic, or a democratic state in decline, we can mark the regime's anti-democratic trend lines by the lengths its political class will go to hold on to power. Conversely, we can see the democratic vitality of a state in relation to its office holders' attitude towards political defeat or the end of their tenure in office. Years ago, I wrote a book on the political life of Mario Cuomo, former governor of New York. One of the stories from his career has remained with me over the years. It's the story of his failed bid to become mayor of New York City when he lost to Ed Koch in a brutal race in 1977. After his defeat, Cuomo offered the following. You know how the reporters come up to you after you lose. What does it feel like? How you feel? You're going to run again? This is terrible. You must feel horrible. You know, the reporters got around me. Queens, they were asking him all these questions. This is what Cuomo said. I am where most people thought I ought to have been in the beginning. And that is with the people I was born and raised up with. The people I have helped to protect against the blunders of politicians, with the neighborhoods, with the little people. To return to the people is no disgrace. In fact, it is and ought to be a high privilege. One can have more glory in a losing day when defeat is defined only by a loss in votes rather than a loss of principles. Global citizenship in an age of democratic peril demands political leaders more afraid of what they will become when too long in office than what they will lose when returning to the people they were born and raised up with. Now I'd like to just move on to this question of belonging, and I will post here this photograph for you. This is a photograph by the French photographer Bruno Lemel. In this undated photo taken in the Barbès neighborhood of Paris, sometimes referred to as Goutte d'Or, Lemel captures a set of striking images. In the foreground to the left is a woman on a rooftop with a glass of wine. Y'all see her up there? Okay. Beneath her is a group of men in the street lined up for the evening prayer that is part of the tradition of Islam. And in the background, we can see the Montmartre section of Paris and the famed Sacré-Cœur Cathedral. In this one photo, we can almost hear, if you listen carefully, we can almost hear two narratives confronting the vision of global citizenship. The objecting voice says to us that this is the story of a woman driven from her secular paradise with her wine and alluring energy up onto the rooftops of Paris by the forces of strident and transgressive Islamic culture. France is no longer France, as Donald Trump has put it. I think a couple of summers ago, Viktor Orban, y'all know about Viktor Orban? A few summers ago, Viktor Orban said, Europe is no longer Europe. That's one voice. Still another voice intones, no, wait, this is a happy convergence of France's secular Republican tradition represented by the woman. Yet the photo likewise reflects an enlightened tradition of religious toleration represented by the prayer ritual beneath her. Finally, France's ancient Catholic history abides, represented by the towering and serene presence of Sacré-Cœur. No one is being hurt, everyone is being respected, all is in harmony. This latter view is the presentation of global citizenship where the democratic interests of a multiracial and multi-religious polity survives and even thrives in the presence of difference. Any condemnation of the image or satisfaction to be found with it says more about the eye of the beholder sometimes than what is being beheld. Our age of democratic peril is increasingly marked, however, by a primal tribal association of citizenship with blood. We are experiencing the convergence of a variety of autocratic clinging to power with a renewed fascination with belonging that is drawn from race, custom, and national origin. France is no longer France. Europe is no longer Europe. The democratic decline we are seeing, and that many of us are feeling, is tied to this dual reality, the implosion of accepted facts and objective truth, not to mention the erosion of democratic norms found in the erosion of quaint traditions like a right to privacy or the absence of perpetual war, are only heightened by these powerful forces. What then to do about it? We have to begin with the political imagination and the belief that there is a better way forward. And this has to be guided by a sense of a connection to each other, irrespective of our valuable but not humanity-defining national identities. We have to reject the insistence that the stories of impossibility we are being told are true, that they are eternal truths. when I began college back in the 1980s, we were told that the Cold War would last forever. It was in the words of President Kennedy. Now, I was not at the Kennedy speech, y'all. I'm not that old. I'm just quoting here, all right? I see some of y'all looking nervously at me. I was not there in 61 for the speech. We were told by Kennedy that in that inaugural address that the battle against communism and the Soviet Union would be, in his words, a long twilight struggle. We were told we would never see Nelson Mandela alive again. We were told that South Africa's apartheid state was here to stay and that the best we could do was to support what the experts called constructive engagement. Some of y'all don't remember constructive engagement. Remember constructive engagement? It's, we got to constructively engage with the apartheid regime. That's what they told us. We were told that the troubles in Northern Ireland could not be negotiated away. We were told that America could never elect a black president. As an aside, I remember, if y'all are in New Brunswick, holler at me. We'll go to a great lunch spot called Catherine Lombardi's. Get some good Sicilian food, some Southern Italian food. That's how I roll. And I remember the head of the Democratic Party in New Jersey who ran Bill Clinton's campaign, you could Google who he was, told me at lunch at Catherine Lombardi's that white people in Ohio would never vote for a black man for president. See how they do these stories? Never. I was looking at him like, come on now, I want to believe in white people. He was white. He was telling me, no, they'll never vote for him. We were also told that Americans would never support a woman for president. We were told. But we did see Nelson Mandela alive, standing erect, walking tall, no longer in prison. The apartheid state was dismantled. The Berlin Wall did come down. The troubles in Northern Ireland did come to an end. Americans did vote for a black presidential candidate, even the people in Ohio. Americans have and are now voting again as we speak for a woman for president. Global citizenship in our age of democratic peril requires the interrogation of the stories we are being told. What narratives are you, the students in this audience, being asked to accept as if they were truths brought down to us from on high? What are you being told that will slide into the dustbin of history in your lifetime? What pillars of certainty will you help bring down? These stories that I've mentioned were brought down by our personal refusals to accept them, next by collective efforts to confront them, and finally by our willingness to imagine new stories. And I appreciate Sarah talking about political narratives. I don't know if you caught that, but that was a brilliant aspect of her wonderful talk. What pillars of certainty will you help bring down? How can we imagine our politics anew? How do we forge a global citizenship under such difficult circumstances? I want to come back to loss. I think I'm now in middle age. That's what I think about, loss and defeat. Yeah, y'all see when you get there, you young people. To defeat in our effort to confront our darker nature when nature itself seems to strike out against us. Because it is how we manage loss and how we manage defeat in a democratic society, whether it's the loss of a job, the loss of an election, the loss of our stories, our precious stories, that reveals our strength and our ability to move on. For this lesson, I'd like to leave you with the great Herman Melville and the 100th chapter of Moby Dick. The chapter is titled Leg and Arm. In the middle of Captain Ahab and the Pequod's search for the white whale that violently tore Ahab's leg from him, another vessel is spotted at sea. We learn it is an English ship, and Ahab disembarks from his ship to query the captain of the English vessel. It turns out that the English captain suffered a loss at the hands of the same white whale that dismasted Ahab, only he lost his arm. The two captains, one of a dying empire, the other of a rising empire, greet each other by clanging their ivory prosthetics against each other. Ahab is direct and to the point. He wants to know when the English captain last saw Moby Dick. Where didst thou see the white whale? How long ago? He asks frantically. The captain tells Ahab, but he's still dissatisfied because the English captain made no effort to kill Moby Dick after confronting him again after the loss of his arm. And next comes Melville's great democratic wisdom. This is the English captain. There would be great glory in killing him. I know that, the captain says. But hark ye, he's best let alone. Don't you think so, Captain? He said, glancing at Ahab's ivory leg. There would be great glory in killing him. Have you watched the news lately? We see lots of glorying in killing individuals. This is the lesson that the English captain is trying to teach Ahab, the lesson of empire lost, of a transition from one fading power to one that is rising, but Ahab is having none of it. Ahab agrees that Moby Dick is best let alone. He is, Ahab said, but he will still be hunted for all that. What is best let alone, that accursed thing, is not always what least allures. He's all magnet. How long since thou sawest him last? Which way is he heading? Ahab doesn't know it, but the English captain is Ahab's best friend. His warning, if heeded, would spare the loss of the Pequod's crew. But Ahab cannot and will not be satisfied. Good God, cried the English captain. What's the matter? Is your captain crazy? If we are to find a way to global citizenship, a way forward in an age of democratic peril, filled with murky waters and violent monsters about us, we must first swear off the spirit of vengeance, our self-righteous claim to violently resolve the pain, both real and or imagined, that has afflicted us. And we must heed the voice of those who have learned to put down the sword of empire and embrace the sanity of peaceful community. Power cannot save us. Collectivities premised on vengeance will be our ruin. In the end, we must learn the lesson of living with loss, of living with defeat, not as a badge of disgrace, but as one of wisdom, enlightenment, and our greater love for those who share the ship of state with us, a love that is greater than our grievances. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ambar, for sharing your wisdom and your warnings with us. And I noticed in Sarah's talk, but also in yours, both at the beginning and end, a word that we don't hear maybe in the halls of academia very much, and that is love. And I appreciate the message you had as a partisan for love and humanity. And it's our honor to have you here with us at the University of Michigan through next week. We're so grateful to be with you and to learn from and with you. We have time for some questions and answers with Dr. Ambar. If anybody has a question, we can bring a mic to you. Anybody have any questions for Dr. Ambar?
No Moby Dick readers out there? No. Y'all got to read it. Read chapter 51, The Whiteness of the Whale. Ooh, that's the chapter, The Whiteness of the Whale. No.
Good morning. Thanks
Good morning.
for being here. as an Americanist, I really appreciated all the references to American literature and history. My question is about defeat. And I'm wondering when defeat becomes resignation, when we give in too early, and how we know that it's the right time to recede, either as an individual who's an advocate for something, or as a collective.
Well, let's stick with, let's think about our own country, and let's think about 9/11. A horrific day, horrific moment in human history. And the opportunity was presented to respond to 9/11. And nothing that was done or could be done would change the nature of that loss on that day. But what I recall was not a spirit of rooting out perhaps elements of the hate that produced that day. Certainly no resolve to address the politics that produced elements that emerged from that day. What we had resolved to do with Ahab-like confidence was to relentlessly pursue the whale, to smoke them out of their caves, in the language of the president at the time, to hunt and to kill, to hunt and to kill. And of course, this is a cycle. Loss can never fully be rectified. In other words, I'm serving right now on a reparations committee in New Jersey. There is nothing that could be done that could ever compensate for the legacy of slavery and those who suffered and died and labored under that institution. So, accepting of the loss doesn't make it legitimate, doesn't lead to an agreement with it. What it does, and the proper addressing of loss, is to, almost like a reversible raincoat, creatively think about how this situation can be turned towards good. South Africa had a moment in a post-apartheid era where there were any number of courses of direction the people could have taken, the government could have taken. There were members who felt like, we need to string up all these these white folks who did all these things to us. That was a sentiment. Let's pull out the Ahab, y'all. Let me see what Ahab would do. What would Ahab do? South Africa didn't take that course. And I think while an imperfect country it remains, it's a better country, nevertheless, in a post-apartheid era for not having taken that course of action. And so I'm not saying that we must accept injustice, but certainly in the most trivial political sense, losing an election is hardly the equivalent of slavery. But even in terms of the harms that have afflicted us, or that afflict nations, we've got to find a path that leads to living with ourselves and others, as Lincoln said it, with peace. To cherish a just and lasting peace with ourselves and with all nations is how the second inaugural ends. Otherwise, we just return over and over again to our own vanity project of satisfying a sense of vengeance, justice, that really is never satisfied. And I think that's Melville. Remember, Melville is writing at the end of War with Mexico. He's writing at a time in the middle of the 19th century where we're just willing to pursue slavery's expansion to the ends of the earth. And American power is on the march. And the whiteness of the whale, Ishmael says, of all things, it was the whiteness of the whale that appalled me. And so we are chasing dreams and fantasies that can never be reached. And we've got to deal with the common bonds that unite us, the love that is essential for making a different way forward. I'm not suggesting by any means that it is easy, but we have examples historically of nations doing just that, of not perpetuating a cycle of violence and hatred. And that means living with loss. That means making loss part of your narrative as a society and in ways that are acceptable. I will have more glory in this losing day than Mark Antony and Octavian through their vile conquest have attained unto. We would rather have the vile conquest. We still live in a nation that would rather have the vile conquest. We see nations right now that would rather have the vile conquest.
Yesterday we spoke and listened to you, and it was offered that maybe you could talk about politics a little bit, but I think we ran out of time. Do we have any time for that today?
Sure, of course. I'm happy to talk about politics. Yeah, of course.
Do you have a particular question you'd like Dean to entertain, or would you like to hear his thoughts on anything in particular? No? Okay. What's on your mind these days, Dean? In terms of like the lead up to the election, or what's happening right now in the framing you've provided us?
What's on my mind? As a progressive, I find myself in between the forces of avowed fascism and those that are willing to comfortably live with genocide. That's where I am. I think it's an extraordinarily difficult time to be able to see, on the one hand, an overt and powerful, clear, determining force, Ahab-like, to plunge the country into, unbelievably dangerous waters, and to do so without any sense of consequence or forethought. But I also see a non-heroic alternative. I'm not saying it may not be the better alternative, but it's certainly non-heroic to claim impotency in the face of death and destruction that you are patently responsible for the loss of innocent civilian lives. That can never sit well with me. The targeting of civilian infrastructure and human beings can never sit well with me. And what is uglier about it is the democratic claims that are made, small d democratic claims that are made in the name of countering Ahab. There's a scene in called The Musket in Moby Dick, where Starbuck, who represents the forces of democracy, he's the only voice that challenges Ahab. Spoiler alert, it doesn't work out well for the crew. Y'all had 180 years to read this. I can't feel guilty about it, but it's worth a read anyway. But in the chapter called The Musket, Starbuck wrings his hands over whether or not he should confront Ahab, and ultimately he chooses not to. We have to confront not just the clear, evident, vile direction of leaders who would plunge us into the depths and into death. We have to critique the weak Starbucks of the world who are complicit in their own way by a failure to challenge those forces and indeed accept some of the premises of those forces that are more obvious. And so, yes, Kamala Harris is a Black and South Asian woman, and it is important for Americans, as vile a history as we have of misogyny, to be able to cast their votes for a woman, as it was so for Hillary Clinton. But the alternative to the violence we perpetuate cannot be legitimized or cannot be wished away simply because the face of that violence is that of someone who is Black or a woman. I don't believe Dr. King, who I am told spoke here at the University of Michigan many moons ago, I don't believe Dr. King would have said or thought differently about the war in Vietnam had it been administered by a Black Secretary of Defense or a Black president or Black vice president. We have to, our particularities matter. They're very important. I'm not, I think we need to enjoy our particularities, but they cannot be defining of our humanity. So a Black woman president a Black woman who is president who argues that we need to have the most lethal military in the world, that we are not responsible for a genocide, that we are not engaging in horrific crimes against humanity, poses real problems for those who are progressive and want to make change in this era of democratic peril. And so we're caught in a kind of vile, sad trap. But it's not without possibility. It's not without possibility. It would not be the first time this has happened in the United States. W.E.B. Du Bois supported the war, the Great War, World War I. He supported it. Women suffragists supported World War I, and the thought was, we've got to show, in the case of Black people in Du Bois, we got to show the white man we're just as loyal Americans as anyone else. And so we will support this vainglorious European war. We will get the doughboys over there. We will show our loyalty and prove our love of country, and then we will get our rights. Women, girls, we've got to support the war effort. Come on, girls. You know how they talk back then, right? Girls, we got to support the war effort. Come on. And then once we prove we can get down with war, then that will show the boys that we are ready for our vote. See how they auction off your humanity? You see how they auction off your humanity? No. No, no, no.
Thank you for the Moby Dick references. I just read that in class. I have a question because in your introduction you mentioned that you were opinion columnist for the NJ Spotlight, I believe. Yeah, sorry. Do I need to repeat it? Yeah, okay. Cool. Thank you for the Moby Dick references. And you are an opinion columnist for the NJ Spotlight. I was wondering, what is your, what's in recent memory your favorite opinion column that you've written? And what was I guess the process of it? Because I'm an opinion columnist at the newspaper right now, so.
I wrote one about the speech that Abraham Lincoln delivered in Springfield in 1838 that's the subject of my book. coming up. Yeah, I guess I was proud of that. I don't know. I'm not really, though. I haven't written a column for NJ Spotlight since October 7th of last year. And there's a reason for that. Because as I share with my students, you get about 90% of me in person. You get about 60% of me, in my books. And I don't even know if I get 100% of me because I don't even know who I am sometimes, right? Like I think we're all sometimes a mystery to ourselves. But my point was that I knew I could not fully write for an outlet without being censored or, demonized post October 7th. And so I actually have given up that column, and I've given up hosting my podcast. It wasn't my podcast, and that's why I elected to give it up. So I'm not particularly proud of myself for the conventional columns I've written. To be frank, I'm prouder of my engagement with students. I'm proud to be associated with people like you. I'm proud to share my thoughts in my writing, in my research. But my conventional media spots, they belong to them. And I'm not particularly proud of it.
So today we've talked, and thank you again for the speech, we've talked a lot about things that we ought to be doing as a country and as a world. But in this room, we are not really, political leaders. We're not elected representatives. So I was wondering what you think we as college students can do in terms of actionable steps to achieve the goals we've talked about today.
Well, remember, all of those impossible scenarios that I mentioned came to an end because of student protest and activism. Whether it was the anti-apartheid movement, Peace for Northern Ireland, you name it, rallying to be able to elect a black president. All of the things, the youth in Eastern Europe who were protesting, forms of totalitarianism that were confronted. The work that is done historically that leads towards greater democratization and human freedom is seldom done by politicians, seldom done by elected officials, seldom done by those in authority. They respond to you and I, 18, 19, 21, 22, 23. And so it's actually, I would suggest, inverted. That you are the drivers of change. You are the drivers of a new world. We were talking about Martin Luther King Jr. being a C student, maybe a C+ student at Morehouse College. And his letters of recommendation were atrocious. I did in my last book on his friendship with Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. I did some research about King, of course, and you come across his letters of recommendation, and you would not want these people to write letters for you. I'm sure Sarah's got great letters. But Dr. King's letters were like, well, he's okay. He's not really working that hard. We've got better Negroes at Morehouse than this. There were some, these were bad letters. But Dr. King, well, who was he? He was running around acting a fool at Morehouse at 19, 20 years old. But he was a C student academically, but he was an A+ student intellectually. In other words, he internalized what was important and made it part of him. So you can be an A student and not internalize Socrates. You can be an A student and not internalize Toni Morrison. You can be an A student and not internalize Melville and the whiteness of the whale. But give me one student that will internalize the wisdom of the world and they will shake the foundations of the earth. Brother Malcolm X had an 8th grade education, spent a few years in prison, and came out and rocked the world and became a dangerous man globally, hunted. One dude with an 8th grade education. It's what you internalize. It's what you make a part of you. It's what you believe. It's your passion and intensity and commitment. Not at 37, not at 54, not at 90. It's right now in your seat. The Václav Havels, the Lech Walesas, the Toni Morrisons, the Angela Davises, the Sarah Hollingsheads. These are the people right now, you, sitting next to you, who make the difference. You can't wait on Biden or Harris or Trump or something. No. Chuck Schumer. You think Chuck Schumer's going to wake up one day and go like, well, you know, I tell you what, this world's it's just going to hell in a handbasket. Let's change this. That's not how it works. What's precious about this moment for you is the world has given you an opportunity to engage with its history of ideas. And they are handing you these papers, these books. They give them to you. And they say, you have 4 years, maybe you go to grad school, you got a few more years. Wrestle with this. And if you want to come out and work for Morgan Stanley, we got a job for you. And if you want to come out and, do whatever, we got that for you. But some people take these moments and these words, and they're not just taking class. They're gaining wisdom for change and for life to make a difference. What you internalize becomes part of you. That is the key. That is the key. So don't ever accept the premise, you're not elected. You're not selected. You are selected if you believe you're accepted and selected. There's always a call out there for you. We were joking about Brother Martin being just a simple Negro preacher in Atlanta, living in a nice house. Have you ever been to Atlanta and seen Dr. King's house? It was a nice house growing up. He had a nice house. High rooftop. I was like, man, I'm from Queens. We didn't have houses like that. This is nice. Dr. King was not poor. He was a bougie Negro in Atlanta. Y'all know about bougie Negroes? Okay. I just want to know. He was bougie. Trim mustache and everything. Talking like this, I'm going to go to the concert tonight and get my swerve on. He's a bougie Negro. But somebody called him from Birmingham, 26-year-old man. Hey, can you come help us out with this? We got a situation over here. Some of you are being called right now. Sister here is being called. Some of you are being called. You have your Birmingham moment right now. And if you don't know it, you don't know it. But sometimes, if you listen carefully enough, you are receiving a call to make a difference. Accept that call and go to Birmingham and make a difference. Yeah. Don't wait on Chuck Schumer. Please, Lord have mercy, don't wait on him.
First of all, thank you so much for everything you've said. It's very interesting to listen to you. My question is, you talk a lot about not losing humanity, not beating yourself, and also about being a citizen of the world, loving the world and not just loving your country. My question is, how can one as an individual and one as a country not lose its culture and their sense of identity whilst loving the rest of the world and becoming one with it? Thank you.
Well, I appreciate your question. Thank you so much. I think, first of all, we have to accept that it is important to not disparage or in any way, speak ill of the idea that people wish to be part of and to maintain and nurture their political, traditions, community, identity. I'm black I'm a black man with Sicilian ancestry. I love Italy. I have I'm more Gramsci than Giuliani. But there's nothing wrong with appreciating someone's looking up, Googling right now. Who's Gramsci? Don't you Google him. Google that ish. You will like Antonio Gramsci more than Giuliani, I think. There's nothing wrong with the particular heritage, particular experience in the world, particular traditions, set of cultural practices. That's beautiful. The particular is important. I think that was my brief, limited homage to nationalism, a sense that, we do grow up in a particular place. We do grow up with a particular set of experiences. Those cannot be diminished, nor should they be. But it's a beginning. It's an introduction to the world. We cannot simply stay there. We can bring it with us, but we've got to go somewhere else. And the somewhere else is, I see you suffering over there, and I am not disconnected from your suffering. I see you over there, and I am not disconnected from your suffering. At Oxford, Malcolm X, he talked about, there was a conflict in the Congo, and there were white hostages taken, and there had been black hostages taken, and black grief and suffering in the Congo, of course, because of its colonial experience. And he said at Oxford, I get the distinct feeling that you value the death or the suffering of a white hostage than someone else. I think our love is not really true love if it's not universal. It may emerge or begin with a particular sensibility, but ultimately, the blonde, blue-eyed girl suffering in Ukraine deserves our love and attention and our politics, and so does that little brown-haired, brown-skinned Gazan girl dying and suffering under occupation. They both deserve it. Why? Because they're human beings. I'm not interested in states. States do what states do. States gonna state. And I'm not fond of I can get with a feeling of sort of pride, even a national pride. I am not down with this notion of what's the language? Exceptionalism, American exceptionalism, or any kind of exceptionalism. When you start thinking of yourself as exceptional, you got one foot in the path of Ahab. I'm not down with exceptionalism. And thank you for the question.
Thank you so much for everything you've said today. It's been very enlightening. My question's I'm still parsing it myself, but I think with global issues and conflicts, and just even conflicts and issues within your own country or even identity, it can be hard to separate yourself and your own identity from how you feel on what's going on, and hard to parse that with facts. And also it's hard to know what is fact and what is feeling, and when is the time for fact versus feeling. So I guess my question is, because I also think this deals with all the polarization we have right now, maybe if we took a moment to speak from fact sometimes or speak from feeling, things would turn out differently. When is it a time to separate yourself personally from the issue? And when is it a time to engage your own feelings and experiences with the issue?
You got some students here. Wow, well, that's pretty. You don't throw softballs here at Michigan, do you? Y'all bring it. I don't think you should ever discard your feelings or your experiences. I think they're important. and in particular, your conscience and your individual sense of right and wrong. I think more important than anything is the sense of your conscience. And I would rather have you bring your, let's say for the time being, wrong conscience or wrong sense of self than something false. I think you always have to bring who you are to the table. I think we have to become somewhat detached from ownership of that and possessiveness of that in ways that don't allow us to grow or change. You know, I think the experiences with others, yes, we bring ourselves there, but we also have to be willing to be shaped and changed and grow by our encounters with others. I think that's really the profound difference. Yeah, I could complicate it further. It's a complicated question because it's a brilliant question, but I think, you know, you should never feel like I can't be me or I can't bring my belief in. How do I know? I think you have to go with your sense of conscience and intuition. And more often than not, we know when we're doing something that is counter to our conscience. The writer Charles Bukowski famously said, how do you know you have a soul? If you're worried about losing your soul, don't worry about it, because if you didn't have a soul, you wouldn't be worried about it. It's when you tip over into Ahab territory, where you are almost detached from reason and embracing who you are and your pain and your suffering and your individual. And they took my leg. I'm going to, you know. Then you've lost reason and there's no conscience. But if you're struggling or wrestling with, well, I don't know how, that's good. That means you're still with humanity. You're still a normal human being wrestling with your place in the world. That's fine. Bring that with you. Bring your particular viewpoints with you. But also be willing to say, you know, I've learned something. I've encountered something different. I did not appreciate this before. Don't cling to it. These narratives, these national narratives, are so powerful. I marvel at Lincoln's speeches because of the way they end. All nations, the earth. He's always talking. He never ends with, and God bless America, and God bless our truth, and F the rest of you people. It never ends like that. It kind of just ends without the euphoric, you know, over-the-top nationalism that we've been so accustomed to, you know. That's a kind of national neediness that is frustrating and so childish and so backwards in terms of what the world needs. So, we bring who we are, but we don't lord it over other people.
Thank you. First off, good morning, Dr. Ambar.
Good morning.
And I just wanted to let you know that your lecture yesterday was very insightful, and I could relate to a lot of it. It was a very good lecture.
Thank you.
But also in the lectures that we have in ALA 210, we've been speaking a lot about how our world needs peace and how people, inspiration ourselves, how other nations have enacted their ways towards a more peaceful society. But one thing that I was always contemplating, and one thing that I maybe want to mention to you, with you being on the council or the committee for reparations, is that in the historical context in our current, and even in our current world that we live in, is that social movements are often met with and often ended with gratuitous acts of violence, and like even outside of social movements, gratuitous violence is nearly foundational to the institutions that make our world go round. So even in the current context when we need peace in our society, but My question to you is, do you really think that we as the world are ready for peace?
I want to focus on the word ready. And I would just simply say, it doesn't matter if we're ready for peace. Let's go back to Brother King. Was he ready for peace? Was he ready to engage in a peace enterprise? Who can be ready? Who can be ready in the world that we live in? Who can be sufficiently evolved that we are ready for peace? We've all, I don't care who we are, all have been sullied and dirtied and damaged by a world of violence and hate. So no, it's not about readiness. This is about a choice. Readiness, let me talk to you about romantic relationships, because I know y'all could use this right now. I'm looking at y'all. I'm seeing some of these faces in here. I know y'all need some help, so let me hook y'all up a little bit. I'm just saying, maybe it's Saturday morning. You ain't get your makeup on, your hair right, and everything. But I'm just gonna throw this out. You'll be thanking me on Monday. Be like, this worked. There's a wonderful relationship therapist. Probably some of you have heard of her, named Esther Perel. She's a Belgian therapist, American woman. Brilliant. And she talks about the difference between how we engage in love and loving relationships. And one of the points, and this will actually tie in, I swear somehow it'll come back to what you're saying. She talks about how we pursue relationships. And she said, so often we're worried about the one. I want to find the one. And what she says is, it's not about the one, finding the one. There is no one. Love is not about the one. It's about the choice. It's about a choice you make. Because I got news for you. I mean, shocking as it may be, there might be somebody out there more attractive than me. I know. Don't freak out. It could happen. Shocking. There's always someone with more of this or more of that. There's no one. At some point, love is a choice. Now let's come back to ready. Readiness for peace is like finding the one. The first thing we do is we internalize peace. Brother Benji here has done that. He's done the work. You don't know how fortunate you are to have this brother with you. So step one, can you be at peace with yourself? How about being at peace with your damn self? Step one, peace with yourself. Step one. Step two, you make the choice. You're not looking for the one. You're not looking, I'm going to be ready for peace after I take this seminar, after I take Global Scholars and I go to Hiroshima. No, it'll never be enough. You'll never be ready. You make the choice personally, and then in terms of your political engagement, the community you're a part of, you just make a choice. Doesn't matter. You're never going to be ready. How could you be? The images we're confronted with, the choices we're bound to make, the limits we have to our political system. You make a choice, and you reach a point of acceptance. Last thing I'll say on this, brother, is there's a great documentary about Dr. King's last year on Earth called King in the Wilderness. Have y'all seen this documentary? king in the wilderness. And the brother would really, from the mid-60s on, but certainly the last year of his life, he had developed a kind of twitch in his hand, a nervous twitch, because when people are hunting you, it's not easy to live. And he sort of developed a nervous, and he would kind of like hide it, tuck it away. And all, Andrew Young and Ralph Abernathy and all the people, the men who were primarily with Dr. King, they all saw it. And then one day, it was gone. One day, he had come to terms with his life and his death. He was never ready. Who can be ready? What we want to do is find a place of acceptance that the world may go on without us. The world may continue to engage in vile conquests, back to Brutus. But you ain't gonna take my soul. And as long as I have breath in me, I will contribute to peace. That's a choice. That's a choice. Readiness has nothing to do with it. If Dr. King is shaken, if Dr. King is struggling, it's got nothing to do with readiness. A choice as to how you're going to live your life personally, your own comportment matters, frankly, more than anything in the world, because that's all you got. No matter how brilliant you might think you are, I wish we could say, after the civil rights movement, you look at in Vietnam and the protests and everything, by God, look at the American military spending and our engagement around the world. It's just completely reversed, and it's just changed. And just the magnitude of the movement just destroyed any effort at self-enlargement and empire. It's gotten worse. God's gotten worse. That mean the movement was unsuccessful? No, the movement produced something beautiful and magnificent in the world, a model for peace that people can take up at any point in time. We need to get better. That's a choice.
A question here in the back.
So I just had the question of, you're talking a lot about peace, which I think is definitely like something that people need to hear today. And I guess I'm just wondering, when it comes to political and civic engagement in general, I think that a lot of people are faced with a lot of disappointment in things that are happening, but then we still grapple with the idea that, like you're saying, like the world is still going on. So like, how do you reconcile with detracting yourself from one part of a type of political engagement, or detracting yourself from one type of being involved in a certain level of movement, without thinking or without worrying about the idea that the people on the quote unquote other side are still being involved in that engagement, and that can directly detract from what you're doing, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I do understand. There's a great photograph of Lincoln's second inaugural address. In the crowd, unseen, is Frederick Douglass, who's listening to the speech. He is and represents the revolutionary forces of change. Lincoln at the podium, you can see him. He represents the reformist movements for change. And then if you look further up on the right side, standing Above Lincoln, you will see John Wilkes Booth, the reactionary forces against change. Everyone is not going to be Douglass or a revolutionary. How do you know? These folks are called. You hear it. You know, who had to tell Malcolm, hey man, you know, look, you are not going to learn revolutionary politics at Rutgers or at Michigan. You got to do that on your own. That work is on your own. But if you are a revolutionary, however you choose to define it, you'll know it, and no one needs to teach you anything about it. Go on, be a revolutionary. We need you. We need Douglass in the audience. But we also need the reformers. I don't want to disparage anyone who devotes a career in public policy or public service in a conventional institution, because guess what? Somebody had to pass the Social Security Act. Somebody had to pass Medicare. Somebody had to pass the Voting Rights Act. Somebody had to make ramps and create a Disabilities Act. Somebody had to do these. Y'all with me? And you had revolutionary forces protesting, but you also had people inside over the course of decades laboring in newspapers and other institutions to make the world better. Revolutionaries tend to not be long-lasting. Longevity has its place, Dr. King said, but he wasn't here for the long. He was a revolutionary. At a certain point, he had tipped into the revolutionary realm and embraced it. Okay, we all can't do that. Aren't you glad? Aren't you glad that maybe it's okay that you can be a reformer, you can be a Lincoln, you can be someone in the White House, you can be in your position, you can be here at Michigan, you can do day in and day out work that over the course of years makes a profound difference in the lives of many people? Aren't you glad? What you don't want to be is the reactionary. You don't want to be Booth. You don't want to be the forces against change. So, in terms of how do we live, look, if you're going to work in a conventional party or a conventional organization or institution, bring your spiritedness for change with you. And it may take longer, but your commitments are essential. Your commitment for change and your willingness to work with people over time, like water on a rock, can make a difference. We are not all going to be Angela Davis or whomever, right? But if we all do our part and listen to our conscience, we can, through institutions, make the world better. And you simply have to understand, through listening to your interior voice, what you are called to be a part of and called to do. I don't think it's much more complicated than that. What you don't want to do is become a reactionary force for change. What you don't want to do is be an obstructionist. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the inspiring talk. And I have similar questions. And so you mentioned that we have been told from the outside, because we have like different political narratives, and those are external stories, and they're maybe not true or just partially true. But I think we have to pick some of them, and we have already made our choice to pick some of them to believe and to internalize, to be part of ourselves. And so my question is, how can we figure that out? Like, how can we figure that those external stories are from certain particular political narratives, or like, how can we even rewrite those stories to of ourselves and of the world to like to be more peacefully and like more harmonic or something? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I think it's back to your college experience. It's one of the beautiful things about the university or graduate experience is, the ability to put yourself next to other people who are coming from different points of view, different perspectives, to engage, but also to engage in literature, to engage in the world of knowledge. And and allow yourself to be transformed, to change through confronting different and being exposed to different views, different voices. There are many people. In fact, the most profound, radical partners for a better world, movers and shakers, were once the greatest believers in the system. Gandhi was just a disappointed lawyer who wanted to be treated like a true British subject at one point in his life. You with me? It's often the high middle class, those who've gone to the conventional universities and done the good things in life that they were told and listened to the stories, and then they confront a limitation, and then they say, wait a minute, hold on here a second. Those become the Pauls of Tarsus who are struck down, or the Sauls of Tarsus who are struck down and become Paul, and go from oppressing to reconciling and advocacy. Those are the most dangerous figures, the ones who have a conversion experience on the road to Damascus. You get into a university, you read a book, one book. One book. I remember reading Native Son like it was yesterday. I didn't know a book could do that. One book, one conversation can shake up your whole world. Wait a minute. So, allow yourself to have those conversations, to engage with people who may have different viewpoints and perspectives than you do. We can be shaken up at any stage or moment of life, thrown from our horse, and become radically different in terms of our way of internalizing stories that are told to us. Begin to see the matrix for what it is. Oh, I didn't know all that. Huh. Isn't that something? At any age, it can happen. At any moment in life. You just happen to be in a time of life where being shook tends to be much more readily available to you. The stories are less ingrained. They're less, attached to your sinews. But even in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, however old, people get shook and people become parts of movements later in life even, based on conversations, based on, I interviewed a guy named Reverend Richard Fernandez, Philadelphia Reverend, who actually worked with Dr. King for a time. I interviewed him for my book. And this is a little bit of a different take, but I'll share it with because it shows you how one conversation with Dr. King sort of changed his attitude. He went down there and he said, I was surprised by how short Reverend King was. I thought, I read his name in the paper and I thought he was going to be some 9-foot guy, little dude, I said, come on in here, Richard. And they had a conversation, right? Because he was there to help and work in the movement. And he said, the first time I met Dr. King, man, I was talking with him and I was saying, man, these crackers, these no good crackers are just going to do such and such. And I tell you, these are, there's just nothing but white trash, man. And, white trash, man. He said like 2 or 3 times. He was a young person. And Dr. King at one point stopped him and said, Richard, we really have to humanize and love our white brothers and sisters. And when we talk about them as trash, we're really doing damage to ourselves. And he had a conversation. See, and he said that conversation changed his life. Every day, is an opportunity for you to be confronted with something within you that needs to be jettisoned, that needs to grow or change or be removed. Every conversation, you don't know what, you could read something now when you leave here that will change the course of your life. If you are open to being moved. Fernandez had a view of what the movement should be. He had a view of what white people were like. Thank y'all so much. You guys are a wonderful audience, really beautiful people. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dean. I appreciate it. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Dean. Please thank our speakers again. Thank you. If you're able to stay, we have some refreshments in the assembly hall, and I'm sure Dr. Ambar, Sarah, if you want to speak with either of them, we'll be up there too. Thank you so much for joining GSP's Global Citizenship in Practice event for 2024. It's been an honor to have our speakers spend extra time with us to answer our questions and to be in community with us in previous years, moving forward and in the coming week. So thank you, everyone, and hope to see you if you'd like to have some refreshments together. Thank you so much.